Dank check. Reid and Richard. Dank check. Reid and Richard.
Don't know what to say or to expect. All you need to know is that the name of the show is
Dank
Check.
Perry once told me, Lois, a reporter lives by 3 rules. Believe none of what you hear, half of what you see, pod everything you cast.
Yep, that would be a reference to
You see,
Lois Lane.
the joke
Yeah.
here is that every episode,
Mhm.
insert the words podcast
No, yeah,
into a quote from the work that we're talking about.
yeah, we got that. Yeah, and that would be a specific quote from.
It's Perry White!
Yes,
It's Perry White, editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet.
that's correct. Referring to a conversation that happened
With Lois.
Yeah, that's right.
Lois Lane.
Yes. So we are talking today, obviously. Well, there's references to
We're talking
Superman.
we're talking about Perry and Lois. We're talking
Yeah.
about journalism, journalistic integrity.
I mean,
It's,
I don't know if this is about specifically journalism, but
Listen, should the podcast be about journalism and journalistic integrity? Maybe we're not the right people to talk about that.
but
Is it going to become that because we're talking about the Daily Planet, the greatest newspaper that ever was?
I mean, we're talking about Superman for all seasons, correct?
Well, I mean, we're getting so far ahead of ourselves here. There's a whole big tapestry to tap into, to work with. Listen.
Do you want to?
We're getting so far ahead of ourselves here.
Introduce the
podcast?
podcast?
Of course. This is a podcast. It's called Dank Check with Reid and Richard. I'm Reid.
I'm Richard.
This is a podcast about bibliographies. We're talking about comic creators who have massive success early on and are given a series of big old dank checks by DC to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. Sometimes those checks clear, and sometimes they bounce. Baby.
That's right.
This is our miniseries on the works of Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. It's called the Pod HallowCast.
Because
the Long Halloween.
Yeah.
Last week's episode,
Yes.
Long Halloween. We're talking
Rolls
about
right off the tongue. It's a
this,
great one.
this is the piece that comes out right after Long Halloween. Huge breakout.
Mm-hmm.
This is like one of their first kind of blank check pieces after that.
Dank check. Yeah.
Yeah. What did I say?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's the Pod HallowCast. We are already past that namesake episode of the series. This week, as mentioned by my compatriot Richard, we're talking about their seminal take.
Jeph Loeb, Tim
On the
Sale,
Man of
both
Steel.
clear, very unassailable characters.
Listen, of course, there is a whole vast array of muddy waters to tread into, specifically about Jeph Loeb.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we will get to it. We talk about this a lot on the show. We have to separate ourselves from the art because so many people are awful, and it's impossible to enjoy things if we can't reconcile those things a little bit. But big benefit, Tim Sale, as far as I know, at the time of recording, relatively in the clear. Jeph Loeb seems to be the problematic person in that duo.
I mean, like I was talking about with my wife, Gnort, last week.
Of course, Gnort.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes if you like a piece of media, sometimes you have to just try to pull yourself away from sort of the bad, contentious information that's associated with that person. So,
yeah, of course. I still listen to Thriller.
I mean,
It bops.
I don't know.
Thriller is a bop.
I don't know if that's the one that I would tie myself to, but
Well, listen. We know that this is going to get murky. We know it's going to be difficult to wade through.
Sure.
Jeph Loeb, for those unaware, ran Marvel television for a long time. Lots of accusations of racism and racial insensitivity and just some really bad stuff. He's no longer in charge of that. Kevin Feige runs the whole show now.
Yeah, Jeph Loeb was the head of Marvel Television, the Netflix show Daredevil, Iron Fist, and Defenders, of course, and was criticized for promoting some negative stereotypes about people of East Asian and Asian cultures.
Oh, really? In Iron Fist, the show with a white martial arts lead?
where they could have.
Where he gets the secret superpower of Eastern philosophy.
Yes, specifically emphasizing that Danny Rand was an outsider, which was vital to the theme of the show.
I don't remember very much vital about the show.
Yeah,
being
not
honest.
much. Not great.
No, of course not great. Unlike what we're talking about today, we're talking about the seminal take on the Man of Steel. We're talking about Superman for All Seasons. This is Loeb and Sale at some of their best. I know, Long Halloween, obviously very important work.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be talking a lot about Batman over the course of this miniseries, but Superman for All Seasons. Richard,
Yeah.
this is one of your favorites.
This is.
We got to one of yours.
This is one of, as Marin would say, this is one of, they were one of my guys for a long time.
One of the guys.
Yes, I love this piece of I think seminal literary poetry. I think that came from these two. At the time, a very clear conscience writer and artist. I definitely, I'm a huge fan of this. I've talked at length about this in the past. I'm excited to finally go into a bit more depth on a dedicated one, because we are finally able to talk specifically about Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale.
Yes, and famously, we go in depth.
Yes, we
If anyone goes in depth, it's us, baby.
We are connoisseurs of context.
Absolutely. What are some of the things that struck you about Superman for All Seasons? I mean, this is a book that even in if you read the collected editions, it first came out as 4 separate issues, came out September to December 1998, but now you can get it as as a collected edition. Excuse me, and in those in the very front of that, Tim Sale has a thank you or a message to Norman Rockwell. You can see the influence artistically, trying to make this very sort of pastoral, picturesque view of Superman, of Kansas, of his upbringing, of Clark and the Kents.
Hot on the heels of...
It feels like something that would be maybe on the surface be tough for a city boy like you to connect with.
Well, actually, I didn't come from the big city. I'm actually from sort of a farming community in Essex County.
What?
Windsor, Ontario.
Wait. Are you telling me? Are you telling me that at some point you were not from the bustling metropolis of Whitehorse, Yukon?
No, it was my childhood I spent in Windsor, Ontario. Which
What?
is a farming community.
Outrageous.
Produces a lot of great comic book writers like Jeph Lemire.
Jeph Lemire is a terrific writer.
Yes.
Excellent.
So, for coming from a farming community, I understand a bit of the context for this. Maybe that's part of the reason why I like it so much.
Yeah, I mean, would you say that that's a thing that spoke to you about the book? I mean, I mean, obviously, there's lots to appreciate. The artwork is incredible. We have these lovely big splash pages with this Norman Rockwell influence. We're getting a down home, down to earth Clark Kent Superman story. It's being told from 4 different perspectives. None of them are Clark's. What are the things that stood out? I mean, for me, reading this book right away, it's the splitting from 4 issues. Each one is a different season. Superman for All Seasons.
Yeah.
Each one is a season, and we do cover all of them. We do get all seasons in this.
That's right.
In this story.
The story also parallels the events from Superman's then origin story from John Byrne's The Man of Steel, though it can be read on its own.
Yes, and of course we're talking post-crisis era. There's certain things have been established at DC Editorial, and it's coming down the pipe. What can be used, what can't be used. This book is, I mean, we'll get into it. It's both kind of canon and sort of its own thing. I mean, it's referenced in later works by Loeb and Sale. They come back to this. They talk about what's the story I'm thinking of? When Clark Met Bruce. That's a story about young Clark meeting young Bruce. That does have references to For All Seasons. There's a prom night story from a later book with Clark and Lana going to prom together, and we see some of that in this book. There's lots of connections, but it does feel nicely self-contained in a way that many books don't do when they are tied into continuity. I mean, often those things get dragged through so many different versions and so many different creative decisions, and you want to make sure people know that it's continuity, so you keep hammering back to it. But this is very subtly, it's its own thing with these nice connections to Byrne's Man of Steel, to these later stories that Loeb and Sale would do. It's kind of a miracle in a way that it works at all as standalone.
DC famously known for messing up continuity and not being great at managing that.
You could say it's a crisis.
That would be a thing that you could say.
It's a crisis.
Yes, something that DC has used many a time. Finally, actually moving away from sort of using crisis recently, but...
Was it the final crisis?
Oh, well, that's that was one of the things that they used for sure.
Richard, crises aside.
Yes.
We have to talk about this book.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that you mentioned was sort of a lot of this melancholy sort of like regular life bit of Clark and Superman that you get. But one of the things that this book also was sort of held high for was its sort of actual usage of Superman being Superman, showing the grandeur of Superman. That specifically is one of the things that Loeb had in an interview was even noted as saying was that he wanted to show the grandeur that is Superman. That's why they had sort of these double page spreads with big sky shots.
And that's the Norman Rockwell influence, of course.
Exactly.
Not only just because of the connection to farmland in the Midwest and that sort of folksy Americana that the book is trading on, but the scope of a man that can fly and lift a train or submarine as he does.
For sure,
in this book.
Sale gets a lot of the credit for this, which he's an incredible artist, but Bjarne Hansen was actually on this as well, and I think that's where you get a lot of the colors that you wouldn't typically get from Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale book.
Of course, we should talk about. I mean, Long Halloween, and next week when we talk about Dark Victory, obviously a very specific palette being used for Batman and Batman stories. Yes, so this book we already know writer's Jeph Loeb, the artist as in the pencils and inks, it's Tim Sale, colors like you said. It was Bjarne Hansen. The letters on this one was Richard Starkings. Excuse me. Oh.
I think
editor was Joey Cavalieri. I'm sorry.
No. It's good. I think
I'm sorry. We're doing a podcast. This is deeply unprofessional of me. We're terrible at what we do.
It's fine. You're sick. It's what we got to do.
The mic.
Yeah.
I am no Superman.
No, you're definitely not. Yeah.
I might have whatever they have when everyone passes out and coughs and falls asleep in the winter segment of the book.
That is a thing that happens.
Maybe I have that. Richard
seems unlikely. But it's a possibility. I think one of the most important things that we need to talk about this is specifically the key, I think, to this whole story working as well as it does is the narration style. Loeb never intended to have a narrator, but he did not. He didn't want the story from Superman's point of view.
Totally true. There's a quote that he gave where he said he didn't feel comfortable being inside the head of an icon. I think that's totally evident in the way that he did this book. Beyond just having the 4 different seasons, each section is narrated by somebody different. The spring section is narrated by Jonathan Kent, by Pa Kent.
Yeah.
Not Kevin Costner, not Tornadoed.
No.
Although comes close, we get a tornado in this one.
That's right.
The summer book is narrated by Lois Lane, Va-Va-Voom. The autumn book is narrated by Lex Luthor, and winter is Lana Lang.
Yeah.
3 LLs.
And a couple
and 1 JK.
Couple bossy brunettes, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah. We love a bossy brunette.
Yeah.
Listen, there are some universal truths in the world.
Yes.
Among them is that even if you are just an absolute unit like Superman is in this book, just a big beefy, burly, soft boy, you're looking for a sassy brunette, someone to keep you in line and keep you on track. I mean, I just I've been thinking about it. The design of Superman in this is just so incredible. It's one of these things that comes back later in something like Frank Quitely's work on All-Star Superman when he's working with Morrison. He's this very massive sized Superman, but he's not shredded. We're not getting a Cavill Superman.
This is
like totally cut. He's more like
he's a thick boy.
He's a freight train. He's a thick boy.
Yeah.
He's a big kind of, he's in shape clearly, but he's this big chonky boy. And then to see him as Clark have to wear even baggier, bigger clothes to hide how massive he is.
Yes.
It's such a great way of subverting the confidence of Superman, right?
Like
as Superman, he can show up and face down Lex Luthor. He can hover outside the window as he does, specifically in that autumn chapter. You know, he could talk tough to Lex's patrolling the skies robots and things like that. But when he's Clark and he's sitting with Ma and he's massive, sitting on that little porch bench that they've got, you think he's gonna break it, but you get like the gentleness of him. He's a big cuddly bear. You just want to snuggle right in there.
Yeah, the juxtaposition I think between sort of him being this like powerful superhero character to being sort of what is really a down home sort of farm boy, I think is that dichotomy works really, really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's probably, I would say, the single greatest strength of this book. In a way, in a sense, I think the physicality of Clark and Superman, the design from Sale, the colors from Hansen, everything about that makes him work. Arguably more than the words from Loeb. It's hard sometimes with comic creators to fully parse out who is responsible for creating what. Some writers are very prescriptive in their scripts. They write them more like film treatments, and they really kind of spell out what the artist should be doing. In other cases, there's more collaboration. Obviously, Loeb and Sale have a history of collaboration. We're still relatively early in their work together at this point, but it's hard to know who came up with what. But generally, Clark doesn't say all that much in this book, and also he's also the focus for us for most of the book. We're always looking at him, even if he's not talking. He's often not talking. We have these other narrators. So to have this giant hulking soft boy move around, it really puts the onus of storytelling on Tim Sale. He's the one having to deliver the softness, the compassion, the Kent part of Superman, as opposed to the L part of Superman. You know, actually the L is very absent, other than like one lifted submarine and some flying. There's not a ton of superheroing in this. It's mostly symbolic.
Some may say this is not much of a Superman book as much as it is a Clark book.
Absolutely. They would be 100% right. Other than, we do see him in the suit a lot, but again, he's not punching aliens. We're not doing the big things, the things we're sort of accustomed to now in Superman books. It's a very personal story. We're really focusing on the Smallville of it all. We have Lois and Lex with the Metropolis perspective of him, but ultimately this is a story about Clark returning home. It's a story about him perceiving his own failures and shortcomings and returning back to Kansas, trying to ground himself in where he sees a sense of normalcy, a sense of being an everyman, everyday thing. It's one of those, you say you can't go back, but when he does go back to Smallville, everyone just remembers how he was. We get our friends playing whatever game they're playing over at the soda bar.
Oh, that's correct. Yeah.
And he comes back after years and he says, "Oh, you're still there?" And they go, "Oh, we got room for one more."
Yes.
It's a very kind of like sweet old town. It's not like a town full of regret. We see that in some other comic series from other people. We talked in our Aaron Latour series. We talked about Southern Bastards. We talked about how that influenced, that's a small town. You go back and Earl Tubb dies because the town has rejected his vision of the town. This is the exact opposite. It's very pastoral. Again, we're leaning on Rockwell here. It's a very comfortable thing. I'm not from a small town like this, but it feels nice.
Yeah. And for me, it feels very similar to sort of the way that I grew up in a small town.
What?
You did it once.
We did the bit. We already did the bit.
Let's
we did the bit.
Retire the bit. We're not talking about...
Ben, cut that out.
Yeah, we're not talking about the...
Richard T.
We're not
Is he in this?
We're not talking about the...
He's not in this. We don't have Richard T. We do live in a society where we could read Superman for all seasons without Richard G.
You did bring up Smallville, which I think is an interesting thing because there's a direct connection.
Somebody save me.
There's a direct connection to Jeph Loeb, who was actually a producer and writer on the TV series Smallville, as well as Lost. But what's interesting is the way that let's take the bad thing and move it aside for a moment.
There's a bad thing? What's the bad thing? Bad thing we already talked about.
Yeah,
I'm playing coy as if we haven't talked about it, but we have. We know what we're dealing with.
But it's interesting because I think from my perspective, I've always thought of like Jeph Loeb being such a comic book guy, and was really a television guy first and a movie guy.
Totally. He's more from a production end. I mean, I think his first comic work was The Challengers of the Unknown, which we covered a couple of weeks ago. And that was also part of his first team up with Tim Sale. I mean, his comic work is relatively succinct, actually. Jeph Loeb, you're right. Totally a TV guy. And speaking to Smallville, this book is so seen as the catalyst for that show, even divorced of Loeb's involvement in actually producing and creating the show. This series, this idea of going home, of seeing where Clark comes from, of seeing like him develop into the Superman that we know, that's the essence of what Smallville's ethos was, what its mission statement was when it came out. No tights, no flights. It was supposed to be about grounding Clark in Smallville. I mean, they abandoned that at a certain point, but that's the idea of it. And I think DC execs and have gone on record saying the catalyst for that was Superman for all seasons, was that idea.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why Loeb left in season 5 was the fact that it was becoming not the show that I think he initially wanted. It's interesting though, because the way that he got into comics was he was working on a treatment for a Flash movie in the late 80s.
It's the fastest man alive.
That's
He's Barry
right.
Allen.
Yeah. He, the producer Stan Brooks, was basically his closest friend at the time, and he had introduced him to Jeanette Kahn, the publisher at DC at the time. Hearing about his passion for comic books, Jeanette asked him if he wanted to write a comic book for them, and he was quoted as saying, like, it was like Santa asking if he wanted to ride the sleigh, and which then eventually became Challengers of the Unknown.
Would love to ride the sleigh.
Yes.
We love Santa. Who wouldn't love Santa? Of course.
Love Santa.
Being asked to write a comic, not having to beg as some of us have to do sometimes,
Yes.
It's a crazy industry. It's hard to be in there.
Sometimes people just get asked to do it. Other people have to try very
It's
hard.
never happened.
No.
I've never been asked.
No. But yeah, I think that to talk a bit more about the different pieces of the spring, summer, fall, and winter, I think that it's a really unique way to put out a book that we haven't really seen since or before. I don't know many books that are done seasonality like this.
Yeah, and we're seeing different aspects of Superman through. Obviously, spring being told from the perspective of Jonathan Kent. It's about fatherhood. It's a perspective about watching someone grow up. You're watching them become someone, and you hope you've done your best. Jonathan expresses so much anxiety in this section. He's sitting with Martha and saying, "Have we done enough?" It's about Clark manifesting his powers and things like that. You can see the worry in Jonathan Kent.
It's a
Martha
story,
is the one that reassures him. I mean. Say what we will about a movie like Man of Steel, where we get a Jonathan Kent who says you should let a bunch of kids drown in a bus, but there is an element of Jonathan Kent who is reticent about allowing his son, who he cares for very deeply, to go out into a world that may not be ready for him or may fear and even hate him. And I think it's portrayed so beautifully, right? I mean, that anxiety is such a reasonable thing. I think it's something that I imagine fathers relate to. But to have Martha there to sort of talk him off that ledge, to say, we raised him right, he's a good kid. And we see it in that story when the tornado hits. Clark's immediate concern is that he did not do enough. It's the thing that leads to him being a Superman, going to Metropolis to help as many people as possible. What makes him leave Smallville is that he can't help as many people as possible from Smallville.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
a very heartbreaking thing. It's a great little place. It's a place he clearly considers home because he does return there. But to see him recognize a higher calling, a higher responsibility, not to quote Uncle Ben and go out of turn
That's
or
a
anything here, but
different,
great power comes with, as we know,
great responsibility.
the greatest of responsibilities.
Yes.
He's dealing with that, and it's fascinating. It's very kind of touching to see it from the perspective of this very proud father who's also kind of full of sorrow that this thing has been sort of thrust upon his child that like the child didn't ask for. Right? There's a pride in seeing him rise to the calling of being a Superman, but it's also, he also deserves to have a normal life and things like that. He has to leave behind Lana Lang, his, sweetheart and things like that. We know he meets Lois. We know that he's going to have other bells in his life, but it's a very sort of melancholic feel for that Spring book from the perspective of Jonathan Kent.
It's a story of a father. Yeah,
it ties in with the Norman Rockwell of it all, of course.
Yes, a good sort of thought, a viewpoint, I think, of the sort of Norman Rockwell time period of sort of traditional fatherhood. Maybe you're not getting as much of the sort of like seen but not heard father that your typical 1950s literary would show.
He's very warm. I mean, it's not to say he's the most open, but we get that really lovely. There's a really lovely splash page of both Clark and Jonathan looking out at a sunset, and Clark says, "Does this ever get old?" And he says, "Nope, it doesn't." They're not even standing together. They don't have arms around each other or anything like that. But there's a very deep connection. It's palpable. The emotional warmth between them is as palpable as the sunset, right? I mean, we talk about visual language and what are we using to tell this story. Tim Sale, sets them up to be separate on the page, but then when the colors come in, when Hanson's colors come in, and there are all these warm oranges and things like that, you see what's binding them together. It's this very loving, warm father-son relationship. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great sort of intro to contextualizing Superman very immediately, right? Showing that where he comes from is the first book that you're getting, right? Like you're getting this sort of perspective that is like he was raised by these very like normal people from a very small town perspective, and that's really where Superman feels the most comfortable and is forced to sort of pull himself away from the thing that makes him the most comfortable to be exceptional, but where he's actually probably the most human and the most himself is actually in Smallville.
Yes, absolutely. It's the springtime of his life. It's where he comes from.
Definitely. Which obviously brings us into summer.
Spring always goes into summer.
That's right. Yes, that is the way that it works. And this one is narrated by Lois Lane, who some might say, well, yes, of course, we stan Lois Lane.
We stan LL.
Yes, absolutely.
Lois Lane, Lana Lang, Lex Luthor, Lori Lamaris.
A lot of LLs in there.
A lot of LLs. Superman's got a predilection.
That's interesting.
For LLs.
Yes.
But
I mean, the hottest part of the book.
Oh, Vavafoom.
Yes.
Absolutely. Lois Lane, can we talk a little bit about Tim Sale's drawing of Lois Lane? Many of the faces in general in this book, as per Tim Sale's style, relatively minimal. He's not drawing in a lot of contour or a lot of specifics in terms of wrinkles or laugh lines or things like that on faces. You also wouldn't necessarily expect them in people this young, but they're generally, the features are relatively small versus the size of the face. It kind of gives them, again, that sort of big soft boy thing. Lois Lane, very like big eyes drawn very sharply, almost has it makes me think of my family loves the theater, loves things like that. It makes me think of, there was a Mikado poster that we had in our house, had this very sort of tailored, very like specific dark lined inked eyes on the poster. And Lois kind of has that, and the hair swoops and kind of partly covers one eye. We see one other eye. It almost looks like an old poster or something from like a bygone. It makes me think of those old Montmartre posters, like a Moulin Rouge kind of like era
Definitely,
thing.
yes.
I mean,
some French inclusion there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that she's definitely drawn to be attractive, but isn't sort of objectified, which I think is an important piece.
No, absolutely not. I mean, in some ways, you could even argue that she's not necessarily being drawn to be an attractive person, but that Tim Sale is sort of almost tapped into a primal visual language where the shape of the eye, the specific color of her eye that Hansen provides, and just the movement of the hair implies the confidence, the sexiness, the va-va-voom, if you will, of what we know and expect from a Lois Lane.
I think that this Lois Lane is more, they really focus on the curiosity that she has, especially when Superman shows up. It's more of the trying to understand how this person exists and sort of what is behind the sort of perceived sort of exterior of Superman. And it's really more about sort of like trying to understand who this person is on the inside, which I think portrays her really well as a journalist. I think they do a great job here.
Well, and the best part about Lois Lane, she, the thing that makes her a great journalist is when presented with new information, she does change her mind. She talks so much in the early bits of this that you see her city cynicism.
Yes.
You see her think that he's too good to be true. I think she uses the words that he's too good to be true. She talks about how she came up with the name Superman, and Jimmy had a bad name like Mighty Man or something like that he was pitching.
Because we shit on Jimmy Olsen, of course.
Listen, you can't be in the proximity of a Lois Lane and be a Jimmy. I mean, I'm saying this clearly as a Jimmy Olsen. I am the Jimmy Olsen of.
If I'm surprised you haven't gone out for some roles as Jimmy Olsen.
I could.
You could. You're definitely a Jimmy Olsen type.
I definitely, yeah. I mean, I would benefit in my life from a signal watch that summoned my chonky strong friend.
Yes, definitely.
That would be that's what I need. I mean, like I said, Superman, he's an absolute unit in this. It would 100%. Be good to turn a little dial on my watch and have that at my disposal.
Definitely.
But Lois talks about all of these things. She talks about naming him Superman. She calls him too good to be true. And then she says, but he just is. Mm-hmm. And she has to reevaluate her entire perspective, even as a journalist. This is not a book where she's necessarily hunting down a story. We're not following her uncover a mystery or something like that. But we do get a sense of her journalistic integrity by even how she recounts her changing opinion and perspective on Superman. Mm-hmm. She's doing her best to wait for the other shoe to drop, and then it never does, and eventually she has to realize that he's the real deal. He's
That's
Superman.
Right. Yeah. Which at a certain point, which makes her such a good journalist, because once she finds the facts out, once she gets the true facts, she's able to believe them and substantiate them. I think that's good.
Absolutely. I mean, I would love to say that that this has no relevance nowadays, that this is just an old story that we like to read.
No, of course not. Yeah, no relevance.
And that there's nothing that I'm seeing that I'm pining for in the idea of someone presented with facts and changing their opinion based on said facts.
Of course. Nothing that we see parallels to in our normal
No,
society.
of course not. Of course not. It's just, it's fun book to read. That's it.
Yes. So at one point in this book, we do end up going back to Smallville once again, and sort of brings up it feels like the end of summer. If you get this feeling of not being able to really go home, because Superman returns home and to find his friend Pete Ross, and learns that Lana has actually left to travel the world. He starts feeling out of place within his city.
Yeah, and I mean, he does this. I'm sorry, Richard. I'm sorry to double back like this, but him returning to Smallville that you're talking about happens after an encounter with Lex Luthor.
Of course.
Happens after he saves a submarine and he drops it off at a military
Some big
base.
action pieces we got.
It's a big action piece, but told very quietly.
Yes.
It's almost an afterthought.
Which is sort of why I forgot it.
But we got to talk about the most important thing in this book, which is Lex Luthor's got hair.
That's right. A different look to Lex Luthor than we're typically used to.
We know he's a ginger boy. We know he's orange. But he's got hair.
His canonical hair
does not have full, long hair like a Matrix Supergirl era Luthor, or
he's a
like
canonical
a Jesse
cue ball, and we're not getting that here.
Yeah, where's our cue ball?
That's right.
He's they say grass doesn't grow on a busy street, nor on a billiard ball. It's something that my grandmother used to say to me.
That's a great quote.
Not necessarily relevant, but it came up.
Sure.
What do we think of Luthor's look in this? He is I think Luthor in many comics is depicted as relatively attractive, if not scary. This Luthor is kind of ugly.
Yeah, he's a bit of an uggo.
I would go so far as to say he might be unfuckable.
Oh, wow.
Although he's trying. He's working hard on Lois Lane.
Yes, in somewhat of a not great way.
There's a kind of an odd piece here where Lois is being held hostage by a terrorist, and Lex shows up and he says, I'll deal with this. And at the time that he says that, Superman gets the gun from the terrorist and says it's under control. And then Lois basically like ride cucks Luthor. Luthor offers to give her a ride anywhere, and Superman says, I think she can get there faster flying with me.
Yeah.
And Lois says, I got a deadline. A journalist with integrity. She makes her deadlines.
Love a good journalist.
She ride cucks Luthor.
That's right. She does.
Is it weird to have this sort of, it's never explicit, but is it weird to have this sort of like implied romantic rivalry between
it's
Luthor
not something...
and Clark? Because it's not even really a rivalry. As soon as Clark shows up, she's made up her mind. I mean, it's no contest. We stand a soft boy.
We do.
But to have Luthor even kind of in the mix, it's not like it's out of, we see it in like Millar's Red Sun. We've seen versions of a Lex and a Lois together and probably in other things.
More prominently, we see sort of a relationship between Lana and Lex in Smallville. So you're seeing some parallels between sort of that love triangle there, which I mean could make a lot of sense. Which that's something maybe that Loeb himself brought over to Smallville. But it's not something that I would say is super canonical when you look at sort of the all of the series of Superman. I don't know how much. Do
you think it's
like
something? Does it break the book?
I wouldn't say it breaks the book. I mean, you're getting some sort of like classic Donkey Kong Bowser sort of situation here, which is like.
Is there a love triangle with Donkey Kong and Bowser?
Well, no, I mean with the Princess Peach.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
and not a great one when you look at sort of the way history is sort of portraying women as being sort of helpless and needing to be saved by or taken by the villain or saved by the hero.
I mean, certainly in this case, even though Superman does disarm the terrorist, Lois is the one that incapacitates him.
Yeah,
she is the one that she delivers some elbows, a couple of hi-yas. She takes down the terrorist and then flies off with Clark. They do a pretty good job of giving her something to do while still allowing Superman to kind of save the day.
Definitely.
I had to bring it up. Mm-hmm. Because Luthor just not his best look.
No, not a great look.
He's got the receding hairline.
The bald thing makes more sense. Do you think that they're heading towards him becoming bald then?
Like if we got a sequel to this book, we would see like a bit of a comb over, and then eventually, as we go,
third book,
he would have the ring, from ear to ear around the back.
He'd wearing a lot of baseball caps,
right? Yeah. No visors.
Yeah, no. Baseball caps. That's literally the opposite of I think what he was going for.
Right.
A lot of baseball caps. Yeah, I think maybe full suit though, but baseball cap on top. Yeah.
Even his suit, it doesn't look that good.
No, not a great suit. I mean, you're getting sort of that weird sort of Rockwell post Depression era raggedy suit.
And he's wearing the hat. We're evoking a lot of sort of 30s, 40s design aesthetics, and even into the 50s a little bit. Even though this book it's not set specifically then. If anything, it's set relatively when it is, maybe like a late 80s, early 90s. But design-wise, I mean, certainly like Clark's boxy suit, he's got that big double-breasted suit. Looks like it would come from the George Reeves Superman serial, like something from the 50s.
Absolutely.
Lex's suit, similarly, very old style, and it's not complimenting him, especially with the gross haircut that he's got.
Yeah, not great. It's not a look that I would sort of, I mean, there's a reason why we don't see it very often. I think that it's so canonical and iconic, more importantly, to have Lex Luthor having a bald head. I'm not sure where that choice necessarily came from. Maybe the 50s didn't find bald men attractive. Who knows?
I mean, listen, we have evolved tastes.
Yes.
New
era.
We like a sexy Lexi.
Yes.
A sexy Lexi with a bald head. Give me a Michael Rosenbaum. Give that to me any day. We could we can leave some Lexes aside. We won't name names, but
Yes, definitely. But there's basically a fire at Chemco Labs that happens. We get Lex is in his exo suit powered by Guardians of the City, right?
Lex isn't actually in the suit though. I don't think. I think
but
it's just his like robot.
It's his
Guardians.
Suit. Yeah. But we find Jenny Vaughn, the scientist, trapped inside of this Chemco Labs before single-handedly dousing the fire. And then Luthor later meets Vaughn.
Yeah, I mean there's an important thing in here, which is the Luthor bots, or if there's people in the suits, they say like, we've got this covered, we don't need you here, Superman. And Superman very pointedly says, you're trying to maybe put out the fire, but you left somebody in there. Superman goes in, gets that person out. He also funnels the fire out of the way.
Single-handedly
he does everything they were supposed to do, and basically tells them if they're going to do the job, do it right.
Yes.
It's great. It's interesting to see Superman. It's one of the early parts of the book where Superman is very pointedly being confident and Supermanish. He's like that with Lex when he rescues the submarine, but he's where he says, Lex, there's a lot of your tech in this terrorist thing. Mm-hmm. If I find out it's you, you're not going to like it.
Yeah.
And same thing sort of applies here. And then, to have Lex show up and basically recruit this person that Superman saves. She calls Superman her angel.
Yes.
And then to have Lex sort of recruit her, she becomes such a crucial part. She becomes Toxin.
Yes.
Toxin.
That's right.
A villain we always talk about.
Do we?
No. He recruits her for a scheme that she is sort of like unwittingly part of. She does ultimately help Superman with it. But, when we check back in with her, she's got her eyes peeled open. Lex Luthor is like brainwashing her. He's showing her a bunch of like newsreel footage or something like that. It's sort of insidious, and Lex just has this sort of gross, balding haircut, and he shows, I can't get over the haircut. It's too much for me.
You're really sticking on the haircut.
He's a bad guy with a haircut like that.
That's true. Bad hair, bad guy.
That's the rule.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's the rule.
To see him follow up with someone that Superman saved to turn them into a tool against Superman. I mean, it's one of those very insidious, very Lex Luthor, very kind of plotty, personal things. And here's the thing: nothing in this book feels too sweaty. Like none of these pieces are doing too much heavy lifting. Mm-hmm. It's there's no none of the plots get too wrapped up in the cosmic or in even Superman's strength. If anything, the plot is specifically designed not to use Superman's strength. Lex is saying like, you can't punch this problem.
Yeah.
When the toxin sort of takes out Metropolis, it's a very kind of pointed decision, I think, by Loeb and Sale to steer away from those things. And I think because of that, we just get to focus on these character moments that Superman can save someone because he is good, and then Lex can go to that same person and sort of turn them into a tool for him because he is bad. And it's this it's a different triangle. It's a triangle with Miss Vaughn as opposed to with Lois, but in both cases, it's Lex is using these things as leverage and these people as leverage and pawns, and Superman is seeing their implicit value. It's a great juxtaposition. It's the fundamental difference between a Superman and a Lex Luthor is the value placed on human life.
Absolutely.
To Lex, time is money, but so is like money. People and money have a correlation as well. To Lex, it's all about a baseline, a common denominator. Mm-hmm. What gets him further? What must he spend? What social or political or monetary capital can he use to gain more power? And for Superman, it's about the inherent value of life itself. It's about protecting people, saving people from fires, giving people the benefit of the doubt, all of those pieces. Even with Lex, he does give him the benefit of the doubt. He could... Another hero would see that submarine, see Lex's tech in there, and say, Lex did it, and go for it. He doesn't. Mm-hmm. He's saying, but if I find out, it's going to be a problem. I mean, it's such a fundamental difference between those two. It's so beautifully illustrated in this.
And it brings us quite nicely into sort of the darker sort of third act, of course, Fall, which is, of course, narrated by Lex.
And Lex even makes a specific comment where he says, most people call this season autumn. I call it fall. And he's talking about, he's plotting to bring down Superman, or at the very least bring down Superman's esteem in the eyes of the people of Metropolis,
which he wants to control.
The entire autumn segment is written like a love letter. Lex is talking about being in love with Metropolis and how he feels betrayed and jilted because Metropolis has chosen Superman, this sort of alien savior. They've chosen him over Lex. I think something that's kind of interesting in this, though, is that there's only the implication that people know that Superman is an alien. In many books, Lex outwardly says he's an alien. We got to, people have to do their own thing. In this, he's very much a Superman. Not many people know his true origin, and even Lex, I don't think, really understands it in this book. But it's that idea that like Lex, Lex kind of views his relationship with Metropolis as, I gave her all these gifts, I gave her everything, I built this great skyline, I made her look amazing, this is my city, and then he just shows up, saves a couple of things, puts out a couple of fires, and they completely forget about me. And he has a very jilted, jealous ex-lover personality in this. I think it really works.
Yes, because just because a man gives you things doesn't mean that he's owed anything.
Of course not. Of course not. I mean, I mean, is Lex the poster boy for misogyny? Is that maybe not necessarily a thing we would think of as a defining characteristic of Lex Luthor, but certainly the framing of this book paints him as that very entitled.
Definitely. We also get that thing that you referenced earlier, which is everyone at the Daily Planet in the building all falls unconscious.
Yeah. It happens relatively suddenly.
Yeah.
It happens suddenly. We see Lois cough a couple of times, but then they do fall unconscious.
And then you find out that it's not just Daily Planet.
No, it's the whole city.
Yes.
It's not LexCorp building. That building's all sealed off.
Yes.
Lex is fine. We do get a great little scene of somebody shaving Lex in this in this segment, and they nick him, and he says, "It's okay. You made a mistake. I forgive you." You expect something
bad
violent,
to happen,
maniacal. And you see the difference in terms of how he views people. He expects very little from them.
Yes.
He's the genius. He's the powerful one. It almost doesn't surprise him that he got nicked. He's not even belittling incompetence. He almost expects it.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing that drives him so crazy about Superman is he's the one person who out-competences him.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter if Superman is smarter than him. He's just more capable than he is.
Exactly. And the image of Superman hovering outside his window, this is something that gets recreated in all sorts of Superman stories. It's so well done here. It's one of those moments where the exact same body shape that we had that was previously masked under baggy clothes and things like that, Tim Sale hasn't redrawn Superman here, but he's given him a new posture, a new perspective.
That's right.
Again, I talked about Frank Quitely and Grant Morrison in All-Star Superman. There's very careful character and anatomy studies that Frank Quitely did about Clark hunching and then standing up straight, and how that pushes out his barrel chest, and it changes his physicality, changes his physique. And it's part of even the disguise. It's part of why it's not just the glasses that distinguish Clark from Superman. And I think those things can be traced back to Superman for All Seasons, because those physicalities are part of this too. We have seen the sort of hunched, humble, trying to not be the 9-foot giant, kind of Clark in the town of people that are clearly very much smaller than him. And then we see this shot of him outside the window and puffed up, built up, the feet tapered while he's just hovering and his cape flows. Very powerful image, and it's so neat to see the contrast there. And in this particular one, Lex isn't even looking out about the window. He knows he's there.
Yes.
He won't even acknowledge him.
We then get, of course, Star Labs, which we've talked about at length in many of our other series.
Star Labs is an iconic DC Comics location.
Science facility, yes. Absolutely. We get Professor Crosby, who informs Superman that the city's been struck by a mysterious airborne virus. And that's the point in which he goes and confronts Luthor, who's quarantined at his thing, and which is where he then presents Vaughn, transformed now into Toxin. A pretty big moment in this story, and she and Superman seed the clouds above Metropolis with chemicals, and the antidote rains down, curing the city.
And it's such a. At no point in this story does Lex say, "Ha, I did this. I'm going to beat you." He kind of in
That's
narration
right,
does,
yes.
but it never comes up in dialogue or anything like that. And I also what I love is that Lois and the Daily Planet go down. Clark obviously cares about Lois. There's a brief moment of him being very specifically focused on her, but he immediately then goes, checks the city, stops a train. His first concern is to make sure everyone is safe. It's coming back again to that idea of why he left Smallville in the first place. Do the most good for the most people.
But at the end of the day, he can't save everyone. And of course, Toxin is the one who ends up sort of between.
He basically flies her around as a delivery system.
Yeah.
And Lex even presents her that way as like, I've been working with her. We can fix this. It's an interesting plot for Luthor where it's not trying to frame Superman or even make him look like a failure. Superman is complicit in helping save the day, but it's the Luthor one-up that like Superman's powers are only good for so much. He came to me, I assisted with Toxin. You're welcome.
But
it's a real fuck you.
Yeah, it totally
It's a big
is,
fuck you.
yeah.
It's a middle finger to Clark.
And Toxin just really caught between these two guys, ends up losing her life and dying in Superman's arm, and Luthor couldn't care less.
Yeah, Luthor even says like, "Oh, too bad she was exposed to the toxin she cured for so long. Oh no."
Yeah, very sort of cavalier about her life.
Absolutely,
But
it's insidious.
But Superman,
that's why you can never trust a man with a haircut that bad.
That's right. Going back to the haircut, very important piece.
I've never left.
Yeah.
I've been here the whole time. I will die on the hill of bad haircut equals bad person.
Good to know. But it's interesting, right? Because this is sort of, again, it feels attached to this sort of fall motif that's been sort of set throughout this entire section, which is sort of loss of life and the weight that is on Superman's shoulders the entire time, and the fact that it's like he can never always save everyone. Someone, even the bad people, may be good in some ways, and this is sort of a heavy cape that he has to hold on his back.
And there's a quote from this section that I think encapsulates everything that we've been talking about, that I think really hammers it home. Toxin has died. Superman is kind of grieving over her body because he can't believe that this has happened. And Lex says, they say you could change the course of mighty rivers, but you have so little understanding of how fragile the human condition is, how easily all life can be lost. Being the most powerful man in the world means nothing if you are all alone. No one knows that better than I. It's such a great little moment. I mean, you definitely see how Lex views himself.
Yes.
But it's digging right into Superman's heart.
He wants to save everyone and he can't.
And it's also saying, like, are you even good enough to save everyone?
Yes.
He's not denying his powers or
but you put yourself in this position to
he says, do you
be
even
the savior?
Do you even understand us?
Yeah.
Like, what's the point of saving us? Like, are we your playthings? There's an implication of that thing that we know in comics now that Lex fears, which is the tyrant. He can't understand why someone so powerful wouldn't eventually want to use that power.
Yeah, like what's his long
Lex
game?
can't conceive of power without an advantage.
Yes.
We see him sort of seed that doubt even in Clark of saying,
right.
like, what is the point of this to you? Are we just here so you can feel better? Or
That's right.
like, do you know what human life even is?
Which-
and it's part of what makes Clark return to
That's
Smallville.
right.
He has to reground himself. He has to go back to that place where he feels connected, where he feels human, where he has parents and a sweetheart from high school.
Vavavoom.
Lana Lang, very cute. Not to me, not a Vavavoom. Not
Wow, I mean, I didn't think we were going to come to blows on this
are we
one,
coming
but
to? Is this the division mark?
I think it might be. I mean,
Are you stan Alana Lang?
I stan Alana Lang.
Oh, I'm a Lane boy.
I didn't realize you had such strong feelings against Lana, but I guess that's where we are at.
Listen, we can't frame this as a pro or con. I'm not against Alana Lang, but
you've chosen your LL apparently
up against a Lois Lane. Just
I think personally she's a beautiful woman and well casted in this and got a great character. But I mean, if you feel differently, then
I will not I will not stoop to this level. My toxic cough is coming back. I'm being aggravated. We got to move on.
We don't want to overwhelm you. It's
Lois Lane is the bomb diggity, as the kids say. Fa-fa-voom.
Of course.
We do get Superman back to Smallville.
Back with Lana.
To connect and back with Lana. The thing we haven't mentioned is back in the spring issue, he showed Lana who he was.
That's right.
They I think it's after prom. They go. He takes her to the park or the field.
Yes, some sort of random field. It's a farmland, so
and he asks her to hold his hands, and he flies her up and says, "This is what I could do." And he says, "This is what I want to do. I want to help people." And she says, "I got to let you go.
Yeah.
You can't do that here." And when we get to winter. The final portion of this, where Clark is mostly back in Smallville, it's being narrated from the perspective of Lana Lang.
And we get some sort of...
She says, "I had to let him go. He could never be..." Like she says, "I thought he was going to propose to me. I pictured us having just a bunch of kids, just staying in our small town and stuff like that." And you can see she's kind of got a regret, almost a contempt for the small town, and that's only undone by Clark coming back and helping her realize that her life also has a meaning and a value, and that it's fine to be from a small town. That there's a value in that place. That he sees it. He comes back, and it helps re-energize him and helps him reconnect. And I think it gives both her and Pete, who has been in town the whole time, I think it gives both of them a reason to remain connected and joyful about Smallville as a place, and not to regret leaving. I mean, Pete at one point in that issue says something to the effect of, like, "You both left, you got out, why are you here? You coming back was a mistake." And it's that sort of, you get the sense of the being trapped, contained in the small town. We see that in a lot of these sort of responses to Americana, is the idea of the prison of your own community a little bit. And it's so refreshing to see that Superman had a higher calling. He did leave, but that this place is so much an emotional tether for him, and that he can also pass that belief and feeling on to others, that Lana relocates back to Smallville, and that Pete is fine with Smallville. He's re-energizing them as well as himself.
Definitely. And then we look back at Metropolis, and Luthor has now regained power over the city, and Lois is sort of wondering, where did Superman go?
I have to admit something.
This
is going to be super embarrassing for me.
Okay.
I only just clocked that Luthor loses more hair as the book goes on.
Well, that's right. He does. Yes, you're absolutely
very
right.
embarrassing.
He
for
slowly
me.
becomes.
He
Luthor,
still has the ring
Wisp,
around the back.
Yeah.
He's got brows for days.
Yes.
But only just dawned on me. I'm like I said, we're bad podcasters. I'm bad at what I do.
Yeah, we're not good at this,
I've read this a million times, and somehow only now am I registering that he is increasingly bald as the story goes on.
Yes, I mean, continue to pay us. I have a lot of gambling that I want to do, so it would be great.
Yeah.
But yes, Luthor regains power over the city, and Lois sort of is wondering where he is. While in Smallville, he's sort of Clark is really reuniting with everyone, but Pete sort of chastises them for having ended up back. Pete chastises Superman for coming back, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and it's funny to see him come home so humble at the end of the last issue.
Yeah.
He says, "I just need to stay here for a while." You can see he's kind of defeated. He's emotionally drained. Clark is. That's who I'm talking about. When we cut to Metropolis and we see that he's not there, we also see the emotional draining effect that Superman's absence has on Metropolis. To see those Lex bots flying around, and we haven't talked about the the rooftop baseball kid.
Oh,
that's part
right.
of this.
Yes.
He's a kid who's just inexplicably running on the ledge of a building chasing his baseball. I'm not sure where
You
he
know
was
how
playing.
kids do.
He's not playing with anyone. He's playing by himself on the ledge of a building. Superman saves him.
Something that you could see yourself doing.
What's
Obviously,
the opposite
right?
of an ambulance chaser? Like a Superman baiter.
Yeah.
He's
Oh no, that could be problematic.
He's doing basically that, but even when Superman's gone, it's winter and he's still playing baseball on the roof, and the Lex suit comes by and says like,
I hope this doesn't fall off.
calls him citizen, like,
Yes.
we're concerned for your safety, using these terms that are like not warm, not welcoming, not like Superman. The first time we see Superman and that kid is a line that we now get in the Superman and Lois
That's
pilot,
correct.
where the kid says, "I love your costume," and he says, "Thanks, my mom made it for me."
Yes.
A lovely, again, we stand a soft boy. He's such a lovely, big, chonkin fella.
Yeah.
He's got a great heart. He's a lovely fellow, and it's so telling that we open the winter book by seeing how cold Metropolis has become, not just temperature wise, but spiritually, emotionally, without Superman there. The Lex's version of protection and prosperity not only ultimately benefits him, but it's also it's vacuous. It's not sincere, because again, he doesn't actually see the value in the safety. He just sees the value in the PR of safety.
That's correct.
It's a great little visual cue, and then like you said, to cut to Smallville and to see Pete cold about these old friends returning, saying like, you made a mistake. Like we're not all of these books are necessarily rife with metaphor pertaining to the seasonal theme of the book. Obviously, we have the autumn fall little play on words thing that Alexa's talking about, and that's obviously part of it. There are things that are connected seasonally in each of the issues, but I feel like visually and spiritually, this book probably hits that more on the head than any other than that little fall turn of phrase. This is the book where it's like winter, and we're really dealing with
during the winter.
that emotional fallout. It's the Dark Night of the Soul kind of piece for Superman. We're really in that moment. It's the most seasonal of these issues, I think.
That's right. And Lana is having dinner with Clark and Clark's parents when suddenly there's news of a flood.
Hi, everybody. If we could just take a second here. We're having a lot of fun. We're talking about Superman for all seasons, but we're taking in so much, so many things to talk about, so much content. It's all coming in. It's too fast, and you get a little headache. You get a little freeze in your brain, a little brain freeze. I mean, what a perfect segue to go talk about our sponsor. We're talking about the Brain Freeze Podcast Network. I mean, brain freeze, when you eat too much ice cream, you have some delicious ice cream, you get that pain in your head, you push through anyway. I mean, these are podcasts so good that it hurts. It's the Brain Freeze Podcast Network. They've got great shows. They've got Goods from the Woods. They've got Dr. DC Podcast. They've got Ghost Facers, a supernatural rewatch. They've got the Pop Capsule Podcast. I'm still working through the brain freeze. It's so tough sometimes. These things are so good. They've got the Horse Podcast. They've got Haven't Seen It Podcast. They're the home of the Deli Boys, the one and only Deli Boys. Doughboys spinoff. We don't mention the Doughboys, of course. The Brain Freeze Podcast Network. Again, here's what the copy says. The copy says, podcast so good it hurts. But here's what I'm saying to you. Sometimes when I'm sitting at home, I want to listen to good podcasts. I know I spend all this time recording a podcast, but I need to listen to good podcasts. And that's what they got. I mean, what more do you want? You go to brainfreezepodcast.com. They got all the podcasts up there. You can find them wherever you get your podcasts. They make it so easy for you. It's the easiest thing you could possibly do. Movies, TV, comic books, random factoids and great music, pop culture, and tales from the Yukon, from the Great White North. Incredible stuff. Go check it out. These guys are awesome. Brain Freeze Podcast Network. I don't even have a promo code for you. This is just an ad to tell you to go do it. There's no promo. It's totally free. You can get them wherever you get your podcasts. Who knows? Some of them probably have Patreons. You can help them out too. We don't get a cut of that, but that's totally fine. go check them out. Brain Freeze Podcast Network. That's brainfreezepodcast.com. Check them out on your podcast app. Have a great time. Work through that brain freeze.
Yes.
Which sort of Lana's like, you have to go deal with that, obviously.
I mean, I don't want to harp on this. I don't want to deepen the divide. I don't want to make this a fractious podcast.
Of course.
But I just need to submit my evidence, exhibit A through Z of the va-va-voom factor of Lois Lane.
I mean, you're clearly not showing Lana, so I get it. I mean, she looks a bit like a goth.
What is there to show?
More than I think you're giving it.
Are we saying that I have a goth thing?
I think it's pretty prominent throughout the entire series that you have a goth.
Listen, Lana, girl next door, great. This comes down to, are you Betty or Veronica? You know what? This is the question we have to ask ourselves: Betty or Veronica? Richard?
I
mean, I'm a Veronica. Not that I am a Veronica, is that I would pick a Veronica.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but I don't think that Lana is a Betty.
Right. Oh, interesting.
I think they're both shades of Veronica.
Even in this book, because to me, this book really puts them as one very kind of folksy, again, that Rockwellian sort of ideal, and then the other is this very urban, chic, sleek journalist.
Sure.
I mean, Lana in many comics, I think I would agree with you. Lana in many comics, she's a brilliant scientist, very self-possessing. She's even been Superwoman.
Yes.
In various continuity. But in this book, you still don't think she's presented
I just don't
Betty-esque?
Yeah, it's challenging for me, right? But they both don't really. I don't know if Betty and Veronica is the right analogy to put.
I'm afraid that's all I've got. I'm thoroughly in a va-va-voom phase.
Oh,
so,
I apologize.
I've got my Veronica. I've got my Lois. I'm afraid I'm all out of cultural touchstones at this point.
All I'll say is that I stan Lana. But to go back to the story, there's obviously this flood.
Sure. Let's go back to the story.
With Lana's blessing, Clark sets out for Superman to rescue the town, damming the flood.
They make snow angels.
That's right. Very adorable.
They're having a nice date.
Yeah, it's a cute
friend date.
It's a cute date. I would go on that date. I like that date. Me and Gnort would love to have that date.
Lana's pining.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she wants something to happen here.
I mean, most likely, yeah. I would agree with that. Lana and the Kents are swept away, but Superman arrives in the nick of time. He returns to Metropolis, infuriating Lois with a front page story that and Luthor with Superman's reappearance as Lana finds peace with a new life in Smallville.
Yeah. Again, the flood. We've talked a lot actually about the course of mighty rivers. Lex mentions it in that quote that I said. Where he says you could do that. Where the mighty river comes up in terms of the flood here. Again, a flood is not necessarily a thing Superman can just fix, but he does go out of his way to save the day. He manages to save Pa. There's a little moment there where we think Pa might not make it.
Yes.
It's almost we see his hand holding on to like a log in the flood, and for me, immediately made me think of Simba and his dad.
Yeah, of course.
Made me think of the tree.
At least it didn't make you think of Nala.
No, but back in Metropolis at the Daily Planet.
Well, yeah,
I've got my cultural touchstone back.
Nala vibes are back.
Va-va-voom. But it's a great moment for Superman. Again, it's just doing the most good that he can. It's about living up to an ideal. He does that. He helps the town. There's rebuilding to do. They talk about like he doesn't just fix it for them. He said there's still damage in that, but their lives are intact. And again, he's helped people come together as a community. He's seeing the value of Smallville is brought back for Lana and Pete. Am I remembering correctly? Lana and Pete maybe go on a date at the end of this?
Oh, interesting. Yes, I believe that might be true.
I think there's a little sort of he helps Lana move on. She's been thinking about him for so long. I mean, what's very super move of him there?
Yes, super.
There's a great him returning with the story about Superman saving Smallville, Kansas from a flood is such a great little addition to the traditional Clark and Lois relationship at the Daily Planet. She is this venerated reporter. maybe the best at what she does. Famously bad typographically, constantly making spelling mistakes because she's more about the story than than that kind of detail. She puts her focus where it needs to be, and then to have Clark show up with this very well written they don't even talk about typos in this, but I can imagine from just general knowledge of these characters, it must be perfectly written. It's there's not a typo in it. It makes the front page. And Lois said, "Of course, it made the front page. You got to be where Superman was." There's even a moment where Lois almost puts together that Clark is absent at the same time that Superman is, and then she says, "That's the silliest idea you could have." And again, I think that all goes back to reinforcing those visual cues about the posture, about his carriage, about the way he presents himself. It's not just the glasses that obscure Clark Kent from being Superman. It's everything about him. It's how he presents himself. It's what he does, to the point where both Lois, in a sort of a joking kind of fun way, says that's impossible. He couldn't possibly be Superman. And Lex would also say he couldn't possibly be Superman. If he was Superman, he would never choose to be Clark. Yes. Again, a thing that comes back in All-Star Superman, the connections between this story and later iconic Superman stories like All-Star Superman are so obvious. This passed through the book for me was all seeing these the knock-on effects, the influences down the line for other creators and other creative teams that they would pick up on with these characters. It's really, really great to see. And again, I mean, even just artistically, you can see all the same shapes and moves as in Long Halloween or in Dark Victory, but having Hanson's colors in is the thing that really separates Superman for all. We have the sort of pastel colors of not only just the farmland, but also kind of the city is all in these very kind of light beige washes and grays and things like that. Superman is all flat color. It's blue, yellow, red. Even when you zoom in on him, there's not a ton of like shadowing and extra stuff going on. Very much flat color, but there's a vibrancy, there's a life, there's a there's a hopefulness in the visual presentation of the story, and it all comes full circle. He rediscovers what it means to be Superman, what it means to be Clark. He brings that back to Metropolis. He throws it in Lex's face. Lex is probably fully bald at this point. It's great.
Definitely. Very great. I'm just, my food orders here. I'm just going to quickly go get that. We've been recording these all day. So
you're okay. You're going to go get your food order?
Yeah. Just one sec. Okay. I'm back.
Great. We, Ben cut that out.
Yeah. I mean, that's the end of the book. Do we want to get to the comic sales game?
Do we have any final thoughts? You're moving so quickly.
Yes.
From segment to segment. What are your final thoughts?
I guess my final...
My goodness.
I know. I apologize. Just wanted to eat and I'm getting tired.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that our lively discussion about one of the great Superman works.
It is. It's one of my favorite
It's too boring
books.
for you.
No,
By the way,
no.
What did you get?
I got myself a pizza. Very excited about it.
I don't know. Does Superman eat pizza?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I mean, if he does, he has to eat a lot of pizza. I mean, I'm assuming that his caloric intake is pretty high, considering such a chunky boy.
I mean,
that's a deep dish if I ever saw one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My final thoughts. I think that this book really captures that sort of like now toxic, but sort of this iconic Americana, Norman Rockwell idea of classic America. Maybe when some people say that it was great again, that I think that it captures the good parts of that, which is really just a celebration of blue collar, small town, sort of farm specific sort of area. I think for me, what I like about it is when I like a Superman story, it's more about that introvert, conversation. It's something that I see, I think, in myself, which is like sort of that introvert extrovert thing, right? Which is that somebody who feels more comfortable when they're sort of at home and comfortable and safe.
Are you saying that there's a connection? There's a softness, a reticence to be outgoing and and engaging.
Yeah, a little bit.
And what a surprise!
Yes, well,
a shock to both.
Yes,
Famously, I love going out and interacting with people.
Yeah, I know.
That's why I dedicate all of my time to copious research notes and talking on a podcast
and surrounding yourself with collectible
I'm
things.
Nothing like Superman.
Yeah. No, but what I do like is the sort of like conversations about what makes him Superman and why it's not necessarily about how hard he punches, but how hard he tries. And I think that that's an important sort of dichotomy compared to the way that you can sort of on the surface look at Superman, which is just the tights and big punches. It's not about the size of his body, but that of his heart. And I think
it's also not about the size of his body.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Yeah, I think that I always love this book because it feels very poetic and sort of like this classic sort of like great American novel, which is why I constantly go back to it as like a great representation of Superman, but also of just like comics as an art.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that maybe the most wild thing about this book is, unlike a book like Long Halloween or something like that, awards or critical reception for this book was quite high, but it has basically no awards recognition.
That's correct.
I struggled necessarily to think of what might have taken the award spot from it, but it was recognized at the Gaiman Award, but as the third best foreign comic published in Japan.
Wow.
Hyper specific.
Yes, very specific.
It's a much beloved book, but it's also relatively, I would say, under talked about.
Yes.
Superman for All Seasons is one of the all-time great Superman stories, and
right.
so overshadowed by those things that come later, like an All-Star Superman or even Byrne's Man of Steel or things like that. There are Superman Birthright. There are even Elseworld Superman stories like Red Sun that probably have more cultural traction, more staying power than Superman for All Seasons. It's boggling. It boggles the mind to think that something this sort of beautiful and pastoral is generally overlooked in the canon of great Superman works. It's even in the canon of Loeb and Sale. I would say this is. I consider this a dank check that clears, but it certainly doesn't have the mammoth impact and the cultural staying power of a Long Halloween, of even a Dark Victory. It's interesting to see something so underplayed.
Definitely, I think that it's easily forgotten, but is one of the longest lasting of these books. I think that, like, of all of the things that came out around that time period, this is the one that people can keep pointing back to.
And what's great about it is, even as a graphic novel, it's a quick read.
Yeah,
those 4 issues are not double size. They're not giant issues. You could read all 4 issues. You read the complete story start to finish.
That's right.
in short order. It's a very consumable, very cogent, very concise piece. It's perfect. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, great book. Do you want to get to the comic sales game now?
Yeah, the comic sales game. Let's do it.
So this book came out in September of 1998. The run was basically from September to December when these books came out. I figured we would take from the results of September, where it came in at number 64 in comic sales, sort of units per
outrageous
sale. Yes,
outrageously low for such a
low.
Great piece.
Yeah, of estimated units were 42,843 for September.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, which is also the numbers don't drastically go up. I would say number 1 issue for that month was Uncanny X-Men issue 361, which had 138,138.
Right. There's a lot of incremental differences between these places.
But I figured what we will do for this, like we do always, is I'd love to talk about sort of the issue 64 and the issue 66, or the sort of the number 64 and 66 on the.
This was 64?
So this was 65.
Oh, okay.
So what's the one just below, and which one's just above?
Oh, okay. All right. Let's start with just above.
Just above. So this is a comic series with a future look towards it, I would say. This is a book and a pretty large number when you look at the actual issue, I would say. And it's sort of tangentially close to a major character, but not a major character themselves.
Okay. A future look. A tangential character.
A space sort of odyssey of a character who's not typically associated with space.
In this 1998.
That's right.
We're talking. Oh, it's not a Green Lantern adjacent.
No, that's too spacey. I
too
would say.
spacey. Oh, geez.
There's some interesting versions of characters in this. I would say
this isn't a Legion reboot, is it?
No, getting a little too disassociated. This is a very close to a major character, but not themselves a top run. I would say that they get their own side group.
This is tough. You may have stumped me with this one.
We're talking about potentially a robot character.
A robot character?
Maybe a robot sidekick.
We're not talking Booster Gold.
No,
and Skeets. We're not talking about
more central character than that.
I think you've stumped me. What do we have?
This is Robin's DC 1 million.
Oh, DC 1 million was at that time. It was.
That's right.
What a pain! That's of the far future piece of it. Of course, DC 1 million.
That's right.
That's right. They were putting out 1 millionth issues.
Yes.
And so then everything was set in the 853rd century, which is when the millionth issue would come out if they started monthly from Action Comics #1.
That's right. This is where we get Toy Robin.
Right.
The robot sidekick.
The Toy Wonder.
Yes.
Robin the Toy Wonder. Robin 1 million. Shoot.
Let's go to number 66.
Okay, number 66. So just slightly more poorly than Superman for All Seasons #1.
Yes, this is the return of a major villain.
Okay.
A Superman villain.
Okay.
This is a Superman book.
Okay. A Superman book with a major villain returning. Is this a return of Doomsday?
That's right.
Okay.
That's correct.
And so the Superman book, I there's a few titles running. I'm going to say this was in Action Comics.
No.
This is Superman,
That's
the actual
right.
Superman title. And then number wise, I'm always a little. Are we in the 600s here for Superman?
If you're talking about the actual issue number, we're actually talking about issue number 1.
Oh, this is a reboot of the series.
That's right.
Right. But it's the return of Doomsday.
Yeah, which is Superman: The Doomsday Wars.
Okay.
That's right.
Gotcha.
Crazy. Yeah. Already you're getting a return of Doomsday here. This was the 42,000. So another 42. All three of these got 42,000, which is interesting. Doomsday's back, but far from the mindless rampaging brute that previously laid waste to Metropolis, this Doomsday seems to have inherited intelligence, and that spells disaster for Superman.
It does spell disaster. Brains and brawn?
That's right. You got Dan Jurgens here, Norm Rapmund, and it's a pretty
Dan Jurgens, of course. One of the people behind the original Death of Superman storyline.
Yeah,
co-creator of Booster Gold, A great Superman writer. Dan Jurgens, one of the best.
And this is where you really get that branded book that looks kind of like the classic Superman movies.
Right.
That sort of like 3D text version of Superman.
My favorite title treatment for Superman is the arced text with the 3D treatment.
You can clearly see that we're really, really taking a lot of inspiration from those movies.
Did the movies not take that from the comics?
I mean, you can tell that. I mean, when was the last of that version of Superman?
Superman 4, Quest for Peace. I think we're talking 1987.
Yeah. So
it's been a decade.
Yeah.
Since the last Superman movie, and Superman 4, not exactly necessarily a fan favorite either.
Yeah, but you can tell that this is sort of taking a lot of inspiration now from the movies. I think that maybe the movies originally took inspiration from this, but I think this now looks like it's now a reflection.
You're just talking the design treatment.
Well, even just like if you look at the artwork, even like it feels very much like those classic Superman movies. Like
I suppose that's true. Yeah,
that depiction of Superman, like it definitely feels more of like a classic.
Oh, here's the thing that I love about Doomsday. Looking at this picture, love that he's boots and shorts.
Yeah,
he's got green shorts. He's got green boots.
Yeah,
he's a beast, but he's got some decency.
Yes, that's right. Yes, he's not pantsless like some characters.
Absolutely.
Sometimes when they're a monster, apparently they don't need pants.
Animals
and monsters,
or not even a monster. If you're crossing the dimensional boundary, if your perception of time is different, if you see time as prismatic, maybe you go hog out like Dr. Manhattan.
Definitely hog out for sure. All right,
folks, thank you all for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe. Thank you to Richard for our artwork. Thanks to Aaron Berry for a theme song. Go to dankies.reddit.com for some real comic book nerdy shit. Go to our Shopify page for some real nerdy merch. Go to our Patreon, Dank Check Giant Size Specials, where we're working our way through the Tales from the Dark Multiverse one-shots. What a slug, but we're doing it. Tune in next week. We're continuing our miniseries on Loeb and Sale, the Pod HallowCast, great name for a series,
of course,
with an episode on Batman Dark Victory. And as always, shine those green boots and those green shorts. It's Doomsday, not a nude beach.
All right, bye.
Bye.
They always fight for what is right. Live with danger and adventure. They are men of might.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.